Let me start with a question. Have you ever stopped and thought about what actually makes AI work? Not the technology, not the algorithm, not the platform, but actually what sits underneath it? Because right now, everywhere you look, AI is positioned as the solution. Smarter systems, faster decisions, less manual effort, more automation. And in the world of Salesforce, with tools like Agentforce, that message is getting incredibly loud and basically unavoidable. But here's the thing. Last Saturday, I spent a day at Bletchley Park here in the UK. And walking around that place, seeing how people worked, how they thought, how they processed information under sheer amount of pressure, it did make me realize something a little bit uncomfortable. This story, we have seen that before. We now just have changed the technology. When people think of Bletchley Park, they often think about the machines, the enigma, the bomb, early computing. But that's actually not the most important part of the story. And you know that when you walk around there. The real story is the people. Thousands of them, up to 9,000 people working there. Mathematicians, linguists, clerks, analysts. People who train to do something incredibly difficult. Take massive volumes of chaotic, messy, unreliable data and turn that into something meaningful. And here's the key. They just didn't figure it out. These people were trained. They didn't know before what to do. There were people there helping them, training them. They followed structured processes. They worked with very defined rule, repeated patterns, clear frameworks, very strict validation methods. Because when you're working there in that environment, guessing wasn't allowed. Assumptions weren't safe. And inconsistencies, they were just dangerous. If one person interpreted something different from another, that just wasn't insufficient or inefficient. It was risky. Now let's think about that for a second. Because that level of discipline with that amount of people is actually what most businesses are missing this day. Think about it. Yes, we're no longer sitting in war rooms decoding enemy messages. At least most of us aren't. We're sitting in offices, looking at dashboards, reviewing reports, trusting systems to guide our decisions. But the very core challenge of all of this, that hasn't changed. On a day-to-day basis, we're still dealing with huge volumes of data, mixed quality inputs, human interpretation, and the need to make the right decision. But the only difference is, nowadays, we expect technology to do a lot of the thinking for us. And that's where things start to drift. Because what I'm seeing more and more when I travel around the world is businesses jumping straight into AI or even pushed into AI without asking the most important questions. Is our data even reliable enough to support it? Are our people consistent enough to feed it? Do our people understand what good looks like? Because if the answer if those questions is no, AI is not going to solve the problem. It will accelerate it. And I have talked about that before. Now, here's something else that I spotted recently. I've been seeing more and more jobs as that something called AI training specialist. And when you start reading the description, it might not actually mean what you think. It's not somebody that trains people on AI. It is these people are focused on labeling data, classifying outputs, rating responses, following strict guidelines, applying consistency at scale. Now, let's be honest, that doesn't sound like cutting-edge AI innovation, does it? It sounds repetitive, structured, disciplined, and also very, very human. And more importantly, it sounds exactly what your Salesforce users are doing on a day-to-day basis. Because every time somebody logs an activity, a call or a task, updates a record, chooses a field value, writes a comment in the feed, they're doing that exact same thing. Defining what good data looks like, reinforcing patterns, and especially training the system. The only difference now is that the system is learning. And here's a quite dangerous assumption I just keep seeing. A lot of businesses think, well, we bring in AI and things will just improve, as if by magic. But let's challenge that a little bit. Now, if today your pipeline data is inconsistent, your users interpret stages differently, Your notes are fake or incomplete. Your processes are loosely followed. What do you think your AI will be learning if you're going to use that? Because AI doesn't understand your business the way your best people do. AI learns from patterns, from repetition, importantly from data quality. So if your inputs are messy, your outputs will be messy, just much faster than it used to be, because AI just does things in seconds. And that's where it becomes another additional challenge. AI is going to add an extra layer of confidence because it looks intelligent, it sounds really reliable, but when it's built on weak foundations, is it really that good? Now let's bring that back to Salesforce. Especially when we start to introduce Agentforce, we have seen a big shift, from recording data to interpreting data, acting on suggestions, letting the system guide our decisions. Well, on paper, that's incredibly powerful. It does the thing for us. But in practice, it introduces a new skill requirement. Your users will now need to understand why a recommendation is being made, judge when it's relevant, and spot when something doesn't feel right, but also know how and when to override the system. Now, that's not basic system training anymore. That's decision-making enablement. And here's the issue. Most organizations haven't even mastered things like consistent data entry, clear processes, basic system confidence. But now we're going to ask them to work with AI. For most organizations, that is an incredible leap. And that is where enablement becomes absolutely critical. And I want to be very clear here. This is not about more training for the sake of it. We all know that is not going to work. What we need to do is shifting what training actually does. Because in an AI-driven world, good training needs to build judgment, not just knowledge. It needs to create consistency, not just awareness. And importantly, it needs to reinforce standards, not just a navigation. Your users in the end need to understand, what does good data look like? Why does it matter? How their actions impact the wider system, and then how AI is using that information. Because once they understand that, then things will change. Then they will stop seeing Salesforce just as this system that they will have to use, and they might start to see it as a system they can contribute to. Now let's go back to Bletchley Park for a moment, because that was an incredible visit. I can recommend anybody to go there. They didn't rely on machines to fix chaos. They trained people to manage it. They created shared understanding, consistent approaches, clear expectations. Only they did it when the machines became effective. And today, we're trying to reverse that. What we're trying to do is we're just throwing in these incredible powerful tools, unfortunately on top of inconsistent environments, and just hope that they will bring order. Well, AI is clever, but it's not that clever. It won't do it. So let's go back to the question that we started this session with. What actually makes AI work? Now, you now start to see it's not the platform, and it's not the features. It's not even the intelligence of AI. It's the foundation. It's the data. And more importantly, it's the people. On top of that, of course, you have to think about the structure. Because AI, we like to say it does replace the human, but it doesn't replace human understanding. It depends. It depends on that. And if there's one thing that Bletchley Park has taught us, and especially also me when I was looking around there, is before intelligence, we have to have discipline. Before automation, we have to have consistency. And before AI, we have to make sure we figure out our enablement. And once you get all of that right, AI in your organization will become very powerful. But if you don't fix this and do this right, you're just getting more and more chaos on a very fast level. Hope you enjoyed the session. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. See you next time.